Hey guys, Mike V here from Reliable Automotive Equipment. Today we're going to be talking about the Fronius TPS 270i MIG welder machine. So first thing we're going to do, switch on the back, turn the panel on, light will come on, give it a couple seconds to warm up, and then in the meantime we're going to load our torch assembly into the front of it, open up the side panel. Little lever inside of here that comes out. This piece will go into and turn till it finds its seat. Go all the way in. Ground cable goes up here. Make sure you put it on the negative side for your ground. You do have a negative and a positive on here. Make sure that your ground clamp goes right above where the cable goes in. All right, so loading the spool of wire, the rollers in the machine, pretty much normal like any MIG welder goes on. This comes with a bigger spool adapter, so if you have some of the bigger rolls of the aluminum wire, this will handle that. If you don't need this on there, just take it off. We can take our spool of wire. We're going to load our circle point on the tensioning device here in the back, and then just take this and screw this all the way on so it's snug. And then on the rollers over here, we just flip this lever down. The way you change rollers out, very simple on this, pulling the piece out. These are color coded, where we do have a red wire that represents 1.2 millimeter. The blue one does represent 0.9, which is also be able to use with 1.0 millimeter wire also. So putting these back in, very simple. Have the pin assembly with a little clip on it, get it lined up, push it in, they're all set. So we're going to take our wire, take it off the spool, and this is going to load just basically like a regular MIG welder does. Go through the opening right here. We go into our center point, go into the center, and then we take it and put it into the liner. And then once we have it in there, wheels down, lift that piece up. And on aluminum wire going through the steel rollers that are designed for the 1.2, you want to keep your tension on this about 1.5, 1 to 1.5. And there's a little chart right here on the bottom that will show that. And also the color code difference here for the different size diameters that are available with that. So once we have that done, we can load wire through the gun, go through some settings on the front, and you're set up for welding. So loading the wire manually, you're not pulling the trigger on the torch. We're going to be using the manual button on the front. So it'll start the rollers running. And we'll push the wire out. When it's out far enough, let it go, trim it up. You're ready to go. All right, we're going to start going through some menu boards or the setup on the machine first. So a couple of things. We do have a kind of a quick startup sheet here. There's a ton of information on here. The information in the book, this is great for going through for every little detail on the machine. What we're going to be going over today is the setups that we're going to be using for the collision repair industry. So the first thing I want to do on this is set up the type of material that's going to be inside the unit here. This little button with I has information of what's in there. So if I pull that up right now, I can show that I have ALSI 5 wire in there. It's a 1.2 millimeter wire. It's running on 100% Ergon. And the welding program is a Universal 35. So if I want to change anything on the wire, you would go to the top one that has a little picture of, get out of the information screen first. The top one here that has the little roller on it and the tank on it, if we push that, it's going to ask us what kind of filler material do we want. So to get into that, the little black knob with the green light that is highlighted, push that, and now we can start rotating through everything that is inside this system. So as we start going through these things, there are a lot of things to choose from. So what we're looking for on this is we want to set up for aluminum either ALSI material, 4000 series material, or we want to set up with the ALMG welding program for 5000 series aluminum, and we want CUSI 3 for doing copper silicone. So as we roll through these, you're going to see a lot of choices on steel wires. And as we back this up, there's the CUSI 3 for MIG brazing. CUAL is also used on Mercedes-Benz right now. That's actually copper aluminum wire. We have CRNI, stands for chromium nickel, which is stainless steel, which we do not use. ALSI 5. Even though it says ALSI 5, ALSI is going to be the welding program so that it is set up for aluminum silicium material. As we go through, there's ALMG 5. So on aluminum magnesium, that is going to be set up for the 5000 series aluminum. So those are your basic ones that you want. And to just pick out what we already have in here, which is ALSI wire, I can hit this button, and now it's going to ask me what diameter. Hit the button, and here are our choices of 1.2, 1.0, 0.9, 0.8, and that's all that we have to choose from on these. So this is 1.2 material. I want to take that, and now it's going to ask what kind of gas. Push the button again. 100% argon, and I believe that is your only choice on here for the aluminum wire, so it does kind of sort through some of the choices that you have. So we want 100% argon, and do we want to store this in our system? So if we hit that, that now saves the program that we can now go into information, and that will actually show everything that we just went through to pick up. The Universal 35 is an automatically assigned welding program for this type of setup, so you don't really have a choice in that, which is nice. Hit the little I button again. You're out of information. Now you're going to be welding with the aluminum, and these are going to be your controls up on top here, or your setups to look at what you're going to be dealing with. So on this side where it's highlighted, that is metal thickness. So the knob directly underneath it can change the metal thickness material that you're welding on. If we hit this over, we'll highlight the A. That is the amperage that it's going to be welding at. The next one is going to be your wire speed coming out in metric setting, 3.5 meters a minute. And then you're back to metal thickness on this side. This side over here, what is highlighted right now is arc length control, which you can go to a negative or a positive. V is for voltage, so it's 18.4 volts. And as we move this, if you notice the volt changing, you can also see the metal thickness changing. So what this is called a synergic setting. That means if we're going to set amperage, if we're going to set wire speed, if we're going to set voltage, if we're going to set metal thickness, everything is going to change in proportion to one another. So instead of going into a normal MIG welder where you're looking at a heat setting, you're looking at a wire speed setting, this is a synergic setting that is automatically proportioned for the settings that you want for the weld that you're going on. So even though I am changing the voltage, it's automatically going to be changing amperage, metal thickness. Amperage, it will also change that also automatically. So that gives you whatever you want to set up on this, which the simplest thing to do is metal thickness. So if we take metal thickness and you're actually welding on a piece of 2 millimeter material, this is the best way of starting out, where you go 2.0 and start welding. If it's too hot, take your 2.0 and drop it down to 1.9 or even 1.8. That is going to give you a colder setting. If you feel your weld is too cold, take your number and bump it up. If you started out at 2.0, bump it up to 2.1, do a test weld, go up to 2.2. Then that's how you change your settings automatically without having to guess at things. Okay, now that we have our welding menu selected for the type of wire, the diameter, and the gas that we're going to be using, a couple of these buttons down here on the side, we went through. This is where you put in to change your material that you're welding on. This is checking on what you have inside the system. The rollers with the arrow going through it is how we load the wire in the gun, and this is for setting your gas flow. So the one thing about this welder is if you hold the trigger on the torch to try and load your wire and check your gas at the same time, it has a timer on it that if it doesn't detect an arc after a certain amount of time, it will shut off the drive rollers and the gas flow. So they have a manual setting on this. We already did the roller flow. Even though I don't have a tank of gas on here, if I hit this button, you hear a little click going on, and that's just a relay on a solenoid that is going to allow gas to flow with no wire coming out, no electricity going through it, and you can actually set your flow at the meter. So once that part is done, this one in the middle, the little star button, you can actually store different programs that you have. So in the book, we'll show you how you can go through your favorites, and the numbers on the right side, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, are where you can store your programs. That is listed in the instruction manual that comes with it if you want to do something. Most of the people will go right to metal thickness for setting their setup and continue welding. So now on the bottom part on both of these, we have trigger control on this side, and we have some selections on this side. So trigger control over here, if I bring that up to the first one where it says 2T and it has an up and down arrow, all that means is that when you pull the trigger, it's on, you let go of the trigger, it's off. There's nothing fancy about it. It's just like a regular steel MIG welder gun. It's just an on-off switch. If we go to the 4T, that is going to be a trigger lock. It does not change your heat settings coming in the beginning or lowering them in the end. The 4T program is if you're doing assembly line welding and you want to lay out a 12-inch bead, you hit the trigger, you can let it go, the machine will still weld until you hit the trigger and let it go again. So it's called a trigger lock. The next one is a special 4-step, and if you can see the little steps right there, that is where you can set up for aluminum welding that when you pull the trigger, you have a hot start. You let go of the trigger, your hot start will drop down to your normal welding program that you have in there. And when you get to the end of the panel, pull the trigger again, and that will go to a colder ending. And when you let go of the trigger, your welding is done. So that is your normal special 4-step that you use on aluminum. And keep this in mind, your trigger finger, however you hold that in the beginning or the end, that is your timer that you're dictating on how long you want that weld to continue on at that temperature level. If we go over to this one that says S2T, that will still give you a 4-step process, but when you pull the trigger in the beginning, it is set by a timer inside the machine for how long it's going to be on hot start. And same thing for cold ending. On that, you're just going to pull the trigger, is your hot start, you let it go, it's just going to continue welding. I'm sorry. On the 2-step one, you hold the trigger in the beginning and the hot start comes on and it will go for 0.3 seconds, 0.5 seconds, whatever you set it at, and then it will automatically go down to your normal welding. And when you let go of the trigger, it will go down to the end welding and weld for the amount of time that you set on it. The drawback of this is you cannot control how long your hot setting is or your cold ending while you're welding because it's set up to a timer. So for those reasons, aluminum should always be on S4T, special 4-step, and that gives you the most control that you have for doing your weld. And on this side, we have pulse synergic, which is always going to be aluminum. Sometimes pulse synergic is used on MIG braze also, depending on your manufacturer. If we go down to synergic, synergic has no pulse in it, so it is like a regular steel MIG welder gun, but the synergic setting means that if you change your metal size, your metal thickness, your amperage, your volts, or your wire speed, everything else will change in proportion to that. So that's the synergic setting. If you want to go back to an old style steel MIG welder, if you go on to manual, now you can control your wire speed and your voltage, which are your only 2 items that you have on a regular steel MIG welder. So if you want to increase your voltage for heat, it doesn't affect anything for your wire speed coming out. That you're going to set manually in the manual program. So if that's something that you would like to go into, so you have you only have voltage and wire speed to mess with on that. Then on this side over here, it is going to have what they have a stick and TIG welder. What you can add to this as far as a regular stick welder, that's why you have two negative and positive down here at the bottom to be able to add that to it. The MIG welder that is available is pretty much able to do stainless steel, but it's really not designed for doing aluminum. So do aluminum, you would really have to get a good quality TIG if you wanted to, and remember guys, you're not supposed to weld on the car with the TIG welder. And CMT is a cold metal transfer. That's another addition to this for welding through Fronius. All right, we're going to go into our hot start setting and cold ending for doing the aluminum on the special 4-step. So if we take both these black buttons back here, push them at the same time, we go into process parameters, hit the button that's highlighted, and start end. We want to go into that. So this starts off with our starting current. I is current, S is for starting. So right now this is set at 147%. So everything on here, this is not an amperage reading. This is a percentage reading of what you're going to be welding at, whether it be 20 amps or 200 amps. This will always be a percentage. Factory setting, sorry about that, push that, highlight it. We can change that. Factory setting is 135. That is what it sets at. If you have thicker material, you can bump that up if you feel that you don't have a hot enough hot start. Same thing for the cold ending. When we get to there, you can change that also. So starting current, ALS is nothing that we're going to check. This is if we want to use our timer for our hot start, which we're not going to be using, so leave that on off. Our slope of 1 second is going to be the amount of time that it's going to go from hot start down to normal welding. It's going to take about 1 second to slope down. It's just a nice gradual downgrade to that setting. Slope number 2 is going to be our normal welding going into the cold ending of the machine. Same thing again, leave it at 1.0. It is a factory setting. We're fine with that. Our ending current right now shows 31. Factory setting on that is 50. So that's about 50% power when you go into your cold ending. So again, thicker material, you can have that up around 60, 65. Thinner material, you can drop that down around 35 or even 30. You practice with it and you want to get a very nice beginning at the beginning of the weld when it's a cold panel. And when you're at the end of the panel, when it's really, really hot, that cold ending will be able to fill in that little divot at the end without blowing a hole in it. And then all these other pieces on here, we are not messing with at all. So we get out of that menu board now. And if we go scroll down one more, now we're going to do gas setup. So we're basically going to set GPR is gas pre-flow. Factory setting is 0.1. It's really not a bad idea to have this around 0.5. So a half a second. When you pull the trigger, you're going to have gas coming out of the gun assembly before the electricity strikes the arc. And what that does, that cleans your welding area of any oxygen that's around there and will surround it with 100% argon gas. So a half a second on that is fine. Gas post-flow, that is now when you're done welding, if you let go of the trigger, gas will still flow for whatever time you set this. And I believe this goes up to 10 seconds. That will help cool down the weld at the end, but if you're dependent upon the gas to cool down the weld at the end, and if you get a little bit too hot, the gas is not going to take away the burn through that's going to be on the back side of the panel. So your better thing is controlling your cold ending with your percentage amount and watching how you're welding with it. So we're going to get back out of this. Gas setup, start end. So process parameters, go into settings. View. This is where we can actually change from metric settings to US settings, or they call it imperial. So if you don't like your measurements in millimeters on it and you actually want to see it in the thousandths of an inch, you can select the US version of this. It's actually easier if we leave this on metric because a lot of the wires are marked in that. The material that we're dealing with, a lot of stuff is in metric. So that's how you can get out of that if you want to change that. And if we go back again, let me just start here from the beginning. So process parameter, we go down to settings. Instead of going into view like we just did, we're going to go into the system. And this comes up, we're going to go down one. This is where you do a factory reset on the machine. Because this has so much stuff in the menu boards, and if you accidentally get into a menu and you change some settings that you didn't know that you shouldn't have touched, or if now it's welding a little bit crazy, take the factory settings, push the button. You have cancel or yes. If we go over to yes and I hit that, this is going to be automatic. It is back to factory settings. So anything that you set up on the screen, if we get out of this by pushing the two buttons, we had this set up for aluminum wire. If I check my information on this right now, it's going to show steel. And that's the default setting for a factory setting. So if you do a factory setting, anything that you've changed in there, any gas pre-flow, any of your hot starts, any of your material, now you just go back through and you start again for loading filler metal and keep on going from that. And so that is a great once through on this system. The stuff that we went through on this is just trying to make it a little bit more simpler for you to get to the stuff that you need to get to. That about wraps it up on the Fronius 270i. And if you guys have any questions or any information that you need from us, give us a call, send us an email, numbers on the screen. Thanks guys, have a good day.